Hello, I'm Stephanie Midori Komashin at Hokkaido University of Education. This flip is about academic writing in the Western style. Specifically, we will begin with premises, conclusions, and indicator words. First, we need to learn how to identify them, recognize them, and then we will be able to learn how to use them in our own writing. So let's get started. First of all, you might need to know that Western academic writing is different from Japanese or other cultures' academic writing. It's also different from writing in casual English for other uses. Western academic style is different from other English writing. So please be careful to remember it's not just about using a different language, using different words to express the same thought. Actually, there are cultural differences in how we do our style of Western academic writing compared to what you may be used to from your past experience. There may be things you want to write or you are used to writing when you do academic writing in your culture or when you have written in English before. But those styles may be cultural and may not be appropriate for Western academic writing, which is formal and has many rules about the style and structure. You might want to write something that would confuse a reader of Western academic writing, or it might be impolite, it might be rude. So we want to learn how to use the style and the structure correctly. The most important thing to know about Western academic writing is that it is making arguments. So what is an argument? An argument is a series of statements. And there's one statement among all that is the conclusion, or we could say the claim that you want to make. The other statements are premises, or we could say subclaims, that support the conclusion, that will help the reader come to agree with your conclusion. So in Western academic writing, we want to make arguments. Every structural unit, whether that's the level of the paragraph, or the page, or maybe it's 10 pages or 20 pages, 100 pages, it doesn't matter how many pages you're writing. We always use the same structure for every piece. Once you learn the structure, you'll be able to use it for all of your academic writing. In the structural unit, you need to prove your conclusion or your claim. And the ultimate conclusion of your whole paper, the main conclusion, is called the thesis statement. I will explain about thesis statements in a different flip, but for today, we're focusing on conclusions and premises, as well as indicator words that show us where they are. We need to avoid subjective arguments because they cannot be argued with reason. So we're not just making an argument, we're making a logical argument. Maybe the word logical is not so clear and easy to understand just by itself. So let me try to help explain. In logical arguments, the meaning of each part is clear. So we can say concise, consistent, and concrete. These three CON words. Concise, consistent, concrete. So it is clear, easy to read. The parts are connected in the correct Western structure. The order of the parts easily leads us to understand the conclusion makes sense. That is true. And each premise supports the conclusion. So why do we need to use this style of making logical arguments? Why arguments? The reason is that in life we disagree. Not everyone thinks the same way. Not everyone believes the same things. Not everyone agrees about everything. In Western academic writing, you must argue something as your thesis statement that other people do not already all agree with you about. It must be something interesting, something new, something where there will be some people who disagree. In fact, many or most people might disagree with your thesis statement. And so you need to use the correct structure of premises and conclusions so that you can bring the reader from the place where they disagree to the point where they can agree because you argued well. If you don't do that and you just make assertions, this is true, this is true, this is true, the reader may have no reason to change his or her opinion. Let's think about assertions versus arguments. So an assertion means we just declare, we just state, and we don't have any support, we don't have any evidence to share, just we state this is true. There's no reason. But we want to replace assertions with logical arguments, which are powerful and strong. Logical arguments allow us to defend our conclusion with reason, reasonable thinking. They provide an objective way to handle the disagreements. So in an assertion, there's no evidence, no reason, it's subjective. People could disagree or agree, it's up to them. But with an argument, we show the evidence, we use reason, and it's more objective, so the reader can easily agree with you. So, what is a statement? A statement is a claim that can be either true or false. We will explain this more in the flip about logical arguments, but for today, we just want to know it's a type of statement. And we'll focus on true ones, or ones we're trying to be true today. So there's two types of statements, two kinds, that we will be using. We need to identify them and we need to write them in our writing. These are premises and conclusions. So premise is the subclaim. There will be more than one. These are the argued reasons why your conclusion is correct. So it's a statement that you believe is true. It would be the pieces of evidence, the arguments, whatever you can find to convince the reader, to help prove your conclusion. And your conclusion is the other type of statement that you need to use throughout your paper. That's the claim. It's the statement that you're trying to prove is correct. So when we do logical arguments, we have a specific structure. You need at least two premises, maybe more, and the conclusion that follows from the premises. So this is just a simple example. Premise 1, squirrels like to eat nuts. And a premise 2, peanuts are nuts. So in conclusion, squirrels like to eat peanuts because peanuts fall within nuts. Then from premise 1 plus premise 2, both of those go into the conclusion, and then you have the logical argument. It can be true or false. Ideally, it should be something that we can check if your argument holds water, holds up in the real world. We want to be able to know whether it's true or not, so it's something that we can go and test. We can check if it makes sense. So let's look at another very simple example. Premise 1, Frozen is a movie. Premise 2, Frozen was made by Disney. So in the conclusion, 1 plus 2, both go into the conclusion. Frozen is a Disney movie, and that is true. And we have both of the pieces, 1 and 2, went into the conclusion, and the conclusion has no extra information. Very clear. We will look at other types of logical arguments, such as ones that are false, or one claim is true and one is false, in a different flip. But for now, I just want you to know the basic idea of a logical argument with premises and a conclusion. So, in order to use them, or in order to find them when you are reading books or websites or anything that you use as the materials for your research, for your own writing, you need to be able to find the premises and the conclusions in what you're reading. So I think before we can use it ourselves and do it ourselves, we need to be able to recognize it when other people use them very clearly. So we're going to practice that. One of the easiest ways to find where is the premise or where is the conclusion in something you're reading is to look for the indicator words. When you write your own paper, it's one of the easiest ways to signal, to show your reader where is the premise or where is the conclusion. So let's look at a few examples. The most simple and perhaps easiest to look for when you're reading someone else's writing is the logical sequence. First, second, third, next, last, these kind of words. There are also sequence in time words. So, for example, things that happen at the same time or earlier or currently, now, or later. An important type of indicator word is contrast. Contrasting words. Words like however, yet, although. These show you when we are switching from a premise to a conclusion. Comparing words. By comparison, in the same way. These can also show you the location of a conclusion. Summarizing and concluding words are very useful for finding where is the conclusion in what you're reading. So for example, in short, in brief, to summarize are summarizing words. And they help you know, okay, I understood the premises, I understood the conclusion that followed from those premises. You can check it. Concluding words are a perfect indicator of where the conclusion is. So when you write your own conclusion, please use them. And when you're reading someone else's writing, that's in Western academic writing style, please look for it. It's one of the easiest ways to identify the conclusion of their argument. These are words like therefore, accordingly, as a result, as a consequence, in conclusion. So definitely look for words like this. There are also words that can highlight a main point, a main thought, a main argument, a main concept that the author would like you to understand. And you can use these in your own writing as well. When you want to really highlight, pinpoint, focus on, show us something that you really don't want the reader to miss, then please use these kind of words like mainly, primarily, central, core, key. And we like to argue strongly, powerfully. So words like must, should, show us where the thrust of your argument, the strong part of your argument is located. There's also words to notice opposites. So when you see not, no, never, these kind of words, as well as words like or if, that will help you to understand and not accidentally mistake the conclusion of the argument. I strongly recommend to do markup when you are reading anything for your research materials. So let's take a look at some examples of markup. So markup can be highlighting with a highlighter marker, or you can use a colored pen with different kinds of ink. I recommend you need at least 3 different colors, but you can use more. And you need to do underlining so that you can easily find the main conclusion again when you look at that piece of writing later on. So, in order to be able to use indicator words and premises and conclusions in our own writing, we need to become familiar with them. The easiest way to do that is to find something that you already want to read. Maybe it's a book chapter. Maybe it's a web page. Maybe it's an academic journal article. Anything that's written in Western academic writing style, you can use it. I recommend to photocopy it so you don't write on the actual book, but you want to be able to highlight and underline on your photocopy so that you can get practice in identifying the indicator words, premises, and conclusions. So here's some examples from my previous students. You can see each student has chosen what color has what meaning. So for this student, blue is an indicator word, and orange is a premise, and light green is a conclusion. So whenever she sees an indicator word, she uses blue. Whenever she finds a premise, she uses orange. And whenever she finds a conclusion, she uses light green. And then when she finds, okay, I think I understood the argument, this one is the main point out of all of the conclusions, then she also used pink. So this is one example. But please feel free to use the style that works best for you. You need more than one color, but you can use the colors that you like. So here we have the indicator words in yellow, and we have underlining in different colors, and we have blue and pink to indicate the premises and the conclusions. This person did not use a highlighter marker, but just with colored pens was able to show enough of the different types of the parts of the writing so they can find it again later. Here also, with a very limited palette of colors and just simple lines, this person has been able to identify. And here again, if you change the shape, straight lines versus circles versus triangles versus squares or rectangles, you can also increase the variety so that you can easily find the indicator words, premises, and conclusions. So let's look at a couple examples so that you can get used to this idea. So I'm just going to use some text from Bushido, The Soul of Japan, written by Inazo Nitobe, who I study for my own research. So this is from a chapter of his book, which is called The Training and Position of Women. So when you just look at a large amount of text in English, it can be difficult to know what to look for. How do you know where is a premise and where is a conclusion? So first, we need to look for the indicator words. So as you can see, I've highlighted in green, therefore, so as, and yet. These show us the location of his conclusions. And in light green, I highlighted especially. Especially indicates that this is a kind of aside, extra information. So it may not be necessary to understand the argument. So I have grayed out those words. We don't need to pay attention to that part. And next, I've highlighted in purple, not and no. We want to make sure we don't misunderstand that part. And then I can see the word primary. Here you can see in red. This means it's going to be an important part of the argument. After we do the indicator words, then we can start to divide into the conclusions and the premises. So here, I have put the premises in orange, and I have put the conclusions in light blue. So by using the indicator words, we can sort, we can sift which part is the premise and which part is the conclusion. So this therefore shows us that this orange part is the conclusion from the previous part of this text. But for the next part, we have so as. So as shows us conclusion, so that means this orange part is the premise, and so as to be able to hold their own against unexpected odds in blue becomes the conclusion. And then we have another conclusion from yet. And this one has the word primary in it, so it's probably very important. Here we can see in orange, woman owning no suzerain of her own. So this is a reason, an argument, and blue formed her own bodyguard is the conclusion. So after we do that, we separate the premises from the conclusions, then we can assess which is the most important one. So here we saw the word primary. So we know, and the conclusion is after the word yet, the indicator word, and primary, important indicator word. So yet the primary motive was personal and domestic. That's his main point in this paragraph. That's the main conclusion in this paragraph. And we can see in the dark blue some other parts that are also important conclusions, but the main one, the most important one, I've put in pink because we could tell from the word primary. So let's look at another example. Here again, we just have the text. It's hard to read, hard to see what to look for. So first, we need to find the indicator words. So we have yet, so that, on the contrary. These are all great words that show us the location of the conclusion. We also have for example, which means I'm going to give an illustration, a little story perhaps, so it may not be necessary for the argument. So I grade it out. Next, I've put in purple or not, and also unknown. So we want to make sure we remember the opposite of the meaning. And then we have some good indicator words here. Must, utmost, and preeminent. These all show us something important. Next, we want to divide into premises and conclusions. Remember that premises are the reasons to support, and the conclusion is the statement you're trying to prove. So here, again, with orange and blue, we can see how to separate premises from conclusions. After we do that, then we can identify which is the most important of these conclusions. So first of all, we have the orange here, and we have the blue here. So, it was a disgrace to her not to know the proper way. Why? Because her corpse must be found in utmost modesty. So, orange is the premise, and a blue is the conclusion. Here we have a premise of there's a misconception. As a result of that, I need to explain that chastity is known among us. Remember that un plus not can change to the opposite meaning. So chastity is known among us is the conclusion from the misconception. So after we have separated into premises and conclusions, then we can identify which is the most important conclusion here, and that's this. We have the word preeminent. It means like primary, utmost, most important. So chastity was a preeminent virtue, and chastity is known among us. That is the main conclusion. But we also have some blue conclusions that are also good, but the main one that Nitobe is making here is at the bottom, and we can find it from the word preeminent, as well as the very important indicator words on the contrary. He's showing there that he is making an argument that is different from what most people already think. So let's look at one more example. Our original text. First, we're going to find the indicator words. We have if, however, it was to, so to for the purpose of, thus, and but. And we also have in other words, which means I'm going to repeat in other words, rephrase, so maybe one of those two right before or right after. In other words, maybe it's not important to read for the argument. So I've graded out. And next, in purple, not, never, or. And then here again, we have a great indicator word, mainly. So this will help us to find where the important conclusions are. Once we have the indicator words, then we can figure out where are the premises and the conclusions. So, for example, we have the word however. Then we have the hearth as the center. So whatever is after however will be the conclusion in that sentence. Or here we have the word thus. So after thus will be the conclusion, and that the sentence before that is the premise. So by using these indicator words like however or thus, we can find the location of the conclusions. Then we work backwards to find the location of the premises that lead us to those conclusions. And after we've separated into the two colors, premises and conclusions, then we can identify which is the most important conclusion. And here we have the word mainly. Mainly intended for the home, to deny herself. And a blue is also important information, but most important, we have the word mainly to help us find that conclusion that Nitobe wanted to make. So I hope that you can use this kind of exercise on any kind of writing, any kind of thing, text or website that you already want to read for your own research. Maybe you are using it for a different class. Maybe you are preparing materials so that you can write your own paper. Whatever you're reading in English that's Western academic writing, please use this every time. And you can practice these skills so that when you do your own writing, you can use the indicator words, premises, and conclusions correctly. So as you can see, by doing that, I was able to find in each of these paragraphs, without too much work, I was able to find what are the important conclusions and the primary conclusion in each one. So when you do your own academic writing, you want to also follow this pattern so that your reader can find where is your main conclusion with words like therefore, or thus, or hence, or primarily, or mainly. You want to give these kind of indicators, these kind of alerts, so that your reader can find what you're trying to say as clearly and quickly and easily as possible. So that's our flip on indicator words, premises, and conclusions. We'll continue learning about how to make logical arguments in another flip. But for now, I hope you can use these skills to identify them in the writings, the readings that you are doing so far, so that you can get enough practice that you can use these when you start to write your own paper. Thank you very much, and see you next time.